Ghana's finance ministry is seeking to restructure its debt by inviting eligible holders to exchange about $809.9 million in U.S. dollar bonds for new bonds with lower rates and longer maturities. This is being done to meet International Monetary Fund's loan requirements. Now, the new bonds will have interest rates of 2.75% and 3.25% with maturities of 4 and 5 years, compared to the previous rates of 4.75% and 6% with maturities in 2023, November, and November 2026. The country's Cocoa Board is also offering the option to swap short-term debt securities for longer-term ones. The Cocoa bills represent an aggregate principal of around 7.93 billion cedis, about $699 million. Cocoa bill holders will receive 5 different bonds with a 13% yield maturing annually from 2024 to 2028. Now, Ghana completed the initial phase of the debt exchange in February with 85% participation. To access the next IMF loan tranche and address the economic crisis, Ghana needs new terms for an additional 123 billion Ghana cedi of debt, including various types of bonds and debts owed to different entities. Joining me now is Emmanuel Amoah-Darkwah, economist and partner at C-KADD Global. Emmanuel, it's good to see you again. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on News Central.
Thank you. So in terms of Ghana's larger strategy right now to manage its debt, how does this invitation, this sort of extension of a hand to domestic bondholders fit into Ghana's overall strategy for its debt at this point in time?
Thank you very much. It fits into the broad debt restructuring strategy. Let me give a background to this. Before Ghana received the IMF deal in May, Ghana had to get financing assurances from creditors and then further negotiate the terms, especially of the external debt. And so this is part of what government has to do for government to be able to get the second tranche of the IMF deal. Ghana has already gotten the first tranche of the deal, which we got $600 million. But for the second tranche to be released, as part of the performance criteria, government will have to restructure this debt, which includes the dollar-denominated domestic debt and cocoa bills and other, debts.
Yeah. So let's get specific now. So the domestic dollar bondholders are expected to change about $809 million for a package of new bonds with lower rates. And that's where some of this might get tricky. So 2.75% and 3.25%, and then longer maturities, 5 and 4 years. So this is in comparison to the 2 old domestic U.S. dollar bonds that had a November 2023 and a November 2026 maturity date at 4.75% and 6%. So lower rates, longer maturities, that really does not sound inviting. But that's the exact point, because it's meant to be easier for Ghana. It's meant to be easier for the debtor, not even the creditor. So how do we get around this? How do you think this will all play out when it comes to domestic bondholders and this government's conversation now?
It's not going to be easy. As you know, the first phase that was completed in February, that process started in December 2022, and there was a lot of back and forth in terms of government negotiation with the various creditors, and then final agreement was made in February. Even with that, government of Ghana is defaulting on some of the maturing debt, and that is why you see some picketing around the Ministry of Finance now. So with that said, with this dollar-denominated debt, it's not going to be a walk in the park in terms of the negotiations government is going to have with them, because they are going to take haircuts in terms of the coupon rate and then in terms of maturity, and that is where government will have to negotiate and be able to give them a very good plan so that the government will be able to get around this. The government of Ghana is looking forward to getting release of in excess of about 10 billion in external debt restructuring, and so it all boils down to the details of the negotiation so that these bondholders will be able to accept the new terms that government of Ghana is offering them.
So, Emmanuel, when we look at this, because you said something that's very quite important, it's critical to this conversation that Ghana is already defaulting on some of these even later term rearrangements that it's making. What's even the surety? Is it even possible for Ghana to give any kind of guarantees to bondholders at this point in time that if they accept the longer maturity and the lower rates, that they will actually still get the money of the longer maturity and lower rates? When we're in this situation now, we see that Ghana is already defaulting on some of these arrangements.
Yes, it's quite unfortunate, but it's all because of the current fiscal crisis that government is facing. And so the only game changer for this conversation will be the deal that has been agreed on with the IMF. And so government should be able to put its foot forward and be able to say to these investors that once there's an IMF program and we are looking forward to getting some tranche disbursement in the coming months and years, government will be able to get some relief so that government will be able to honor its obligation in terms of this debt restructuring. And so the only game changer I see in this conversation is that Ghana has an IMF deal now, and that is going to be one of the bargaining chips for government of Ghana for these debt holders, especially the dollar denominated debt holders, to be able to accept the new terms that government of Ghana is offering.
Okay, so let's talk about the foreign currency denominated bonds and the terms that are being laid out. In terms of the fundamentals that might actually be in favor of the creditors, what do you think it could be? If it was you in this situation now, with what the government is offering, would you take this deal? Does it make sense, given what you know about the current state of affairs for Ghana and given the current situation as well? Is this really the best deal available at this time?
Government is making this offer based on what government can accommodate. And as I mentioned, it's because of the fiscal challenges that the government is facing that has accounted for this debt restructuring. And so this is what government of Ghana has to offer. But the creditors also have a point to make in terms of getting shorter dated bonds and also looking at how best the coupon rate will be reviewed upwards so that they don't face a lot of losses. And more importantly, it's also about the exchange rate. And so at the time that they were buying these bonds, these investors will take into consideration Ghana cedi to a dollar, how much was it sold to them? And even if they are going to get these longer dated bonds, how much is it going for in terms of the FX? And so a lot of things will play out in terms of how they will accept on or otherwise of these new terms that the government of Ghana is offering them.
Okay, so I want to quickly go to the Cocoa Board before we wrap things up. So they are also inviting, or rather the board is inviting its holders of its short-term debt securities to voluntarily take and exchange their Cocoa bills for long-term debt securities. So they're to receive 5 different bonds that will mature on a 1 per year basis from 2024 to 2028. What do you think this implies? Is this, again, a good deal for someone who's holding the Cocoa Board's bonds to take up?
Again, investors are not happy with debt restructuring all over the world. And the data shows that anytime that a government wants to do a debt restructuring, there is initial, apprehension to the new bonds or the new details that government offers. So I don't expect anything different. But beyond that, what is Cocoa Board or what is the government of Ghana offering? And I think that these creditors also have a point to make in terms of, negotiating for shorter dated coupons and also getting higher coupons on the interest that the government already has assured them to pay. And so the Cocoa Board, I must say, it's going through some difficult time. As at the end of 2021, according to the Auditor General's report, the board was indebted to a tune of about 12 billion Ghana cedis. And so one of the reasons why they floated these bonds was for them to be able to amortize the debt that was on their books. And so this restructuring with Cocoa bills, it's not going to be a walk in the park. But again, Cocoa Board will have to put up a strong argument and then be able to give some assurances to these creditors so that they'll be able to accept the new bonds that government of Ghana and Cocoa Board is offering them.
Okay, so now we know Ghana has concluded the first part of its domestic debt exchange, and that, as you said, in February, about 85% of eligible bondholders participated. But Ghana still needs new terms for around 123 billion Ghana cedi to qualify for the next tranche of the IMF loan to address this economic crisis. Now, do you think that the second phase will be more successful than this? People have seen what Ghana is willing to do, the fact that it's willing to make these offers, and they'll take the Ghana government up on this. And beyond that, let me also ask, in terms of this invitation to domestic bondholders, do you think it'll have any impact with the rest of those that Ghana is trying to reach debt restructuring deals with, particularly those outside of Ghana?
This is going to be complex, and because of the nature of these bonds, as I indicated, the dollar-denominated debt holders, a large percentage of them are not, are external, creditors, and so it becomes very difficult for a government of Ghana to negotiate with them. And I am happy that government of Ghana is calling for a meeting to have a conversation, and it's all about the approach. If you remember, in December, when government was announcing the domestic debt exchange, it came to the investors as a surprise, whereby government had already noted that this is how much they were going to pay for the new coupons and for the new bonds. But with this, there's an invitation for a conversation, and I think once creditors and the government of Ghana meet and they're able to settle on favorable terms to both parties, then there can be a sign-off. Doing the debt restructuring of 123 billion before the next tranche of the IMF deal, I think is going to be very difficult for government. But it all boils down to, as I have mentioned, the kind of financing assurances and then the negotiation in terms of how government will assure these creditors that once there's restructuring of these debts, government will be able to amortize them when they fall due because of what is happening. You remember that even after February, there are some debts that are maturing, individual debts and the pension debts that are maturing by government is not able to fulfill its part of the bargain. And so these are caveats that these creditors are well aware of when they go onto the negotiation table. And so to conclude on this point, it's going to be very difficult for government of Ghana to be able to restructure 123 billion in this short space of time before the next tranche disbursement of around $600 million.
All right, Emmanuel, before I let you go, I just need to ask this very quickly. Looking at those who may choose not to participate, because we heard about 85% participation for the previous conversation being had, it leaves out what happened to those who chose not to. So even in this situation as well, with this foreign currency dollar-denominated bonds, what happens to those who choose not to take government up on their offers? Are there any legal or regulatory implications for domestic bondholders who choose to say no and who choose to say, I'm not taking part? Very quickly, if you can.
It's difficult. The legal route is quite difficult because of the precarious situation of Ghana's economy now. And so that is why from the onset, the bondholders indicated that they are going to get government to pay or fulfill its side of the bargain instead of going to court. And I think it is going to be the same for these creditors. The thing to strive for in terms of the government of Ghana and these creditors is to be able to avoid court issues, because when court issues comes in, it complicates the matter. Already the government of Ghana is having some serious fiscal crisis, and for you to slap the government of Ghana with some court issues, I think it's not the best solution now. The best solution now is for government of Ghana to properly negotiate with these creditors and to be able to give them some level of assurances that once these debts are restructured, government of Ghana will be able to fulfill its part of the bargain when these new bonds mature. And I think this is the route that government of Ghana should be able to settle on, so that we avoid legal issues going into the future.
All right, Emmanuel, as always, thank you so much. We've been following this very closely and we'll continue to watch how this plays out for Ghana, for our neighbor, because we are very much hoping that Ghana, Zambia, any other African country that's affected with these sort of debt conversations actually pulls through. So as always, thank you for your time today.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. And that's the measure of things on today's Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can download our mobile app. You can head to our website. We're available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on various platforms. We say we're online, offline, and on the ground around Africa. Until I see you again, I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Do have a fantastic day.